Minister, I'm talking about the stand-up order from the Defence Force Chief.
Yeah, well, we've been through that many times.
No, we haven't. No, we haven't.
Well, yes, we absolutely
have.
have.
That stand-up order gave you and New South Wales and Queensland exactly the same provision of 100 ADF personnel.
I don't accept that, and I've been very clear about that.
You're at odds with the Chief of the Defence Force.
Well,
you are at odds with
you can draw whatever
Campbell.
Conclusion you see fit to draw. I don't believe that's an accurate statement in any way, way whatsoever.
I know very well that the order of the Chief of the Defence Force is provided to Premier's officers. I'm also aware with
respect, what is known well or otherwise to you is a matter for you. You're making claims, you're putting things to me. I'm not accepting of them because I don't believe they are
Premier,
accurate.
It's a statement of fact. The Chief of the Defence Force allocated Victoria 100 personnel on Friday the 27th of March. You say in your press release that there was an agreement that you say it has been agreed that the ADF will be engaged to support these arrangements. This is your press release. And New South Wales got 100, Queensland got 100, so you all had the same, quote, extensive resources.
I don't believe that's accurate in any way at all.
Well, that's the Chief of the Defence Force versus the Premier.
But again, with respect, it's not for you to advance what is or is not the position of the Chief of the Australian Defence Force, nor is it for you, again, with the greatest of respect, to tell me when you weren't in the National Cabinet meeting.
No, but I can read a stand-up order. I can read a stand-up order from a Defence Minister.
Well,
I worked for one.
Fine. And I'm very pleased for you. Ultimately, you're putting things to me that I have already rebutted, refuted, and made very clear are not accurate. And that's fine, if that's your choice. But one thing needs to be really well understood. You can put something to me as many times as you like, but if it's not accurate, I'm not going to accept it, because it's not accurate. Simple as that. There was a well-understood position that New South Wales could reasonably expect to have significant ADF support. They had, after all. They were in the midst of the Ruby Princess.
How was that well understood?
Sorry?
How was that well understood? Where was that well understood?
Well, I'm not going to go into what. No, we've had some commentary about how familiar you are with cabinet processes. You've made the point a number of times about how familiar you are with Commonwealth cabinet processes, and it is not for me to go into what was discussed in the National Cabinet. That is not appropriate. I was perfectly free to do that under oath. The Commonwealth Government had a different view, and were very keen that the sanctity of those important meetings were not led in detailed evidence at the Board of Inquiry. So I won't offend that principle. I'm not the chair of National Cabinet, and I don't think it's appropriate that I rewrite the rules of National Cabinet. I'm speaking to my understanding. I'm speaking to what happened afterwards. I'm not providing these facts for the first time. These matters have been well canvassed. We may have a very different interpretation of things. We may have a very different understanding of what went on. I would simply point to the fact that I was in the room, and with the greatest of respect, you were not in the room.
But Ruby Princess was not material to the ADF. Ruby Princess...
Cruise ships are.
No, Ruby
Cruise
Princess,
ships are.
I beg your pardon, Premier, but Ruby Princess is actually a matter for the Australian Border Force, not the Australian
Well, not when it comes to
Defence
turning up
Force.
to inquiries to get to the bottom of it, it seems. But in any event...
The provision of support from the
listen to what I said.
Ruby Princess is Border Force, not Defence Force.
Well, you didn't listen to what I was saying. So let me, again, or maybe I didn't explain it as well as I perhaps could have. There was an acknowledgement, and there was, in my judgment, a reasonable expectation that could have been formed, more than that in fact, on the part of the New South Wales Government, that given that cruise ships had been diverted from other parts of the country, given that the Ruby Princess issue was still, in one form or another, a live issue, that there were greater demands being placed on New South Wales and Sydney than Victoria.
Border Force, not Defence Force.
Hang on a minute. We're
Very
talking about
very different. It's like SES to VicPol.
No, that's not accurate at all. Well, again, one of the ways in which we'd get probably through this a bit quicker is if I can answer the question and then you can ask the next one. So if that's okay, it's a recognition that there was a lot going on in Sydney at the time, and therefore for a new program, an additional program, then there would be perhaps less resources to be able to deal with that. That's the point that I'm making, and not for the first time. It's been made many, many times.